Hi everyone, this is Ellen from Astrology Journal. I want to talk about Uranus's ingress into Gemini that happened on July 7th at 3:45 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I'm recording this on July 8th and I'll probably have it posted on July 9th. This chart that we're going to be looking at is good until November 7th. On November 7th, Uranus will return to Taurus and then stay there until April, I think it's 26th of next year, when it returns to Gemini. So this chart is just showing us for the next 4 months, and then we'll look at Uranus's ingress on the 26th of April next year to understand what the next 7 years energetically are about. This chart is what is our task, or what is the lay of the land for humanity this next 4 months? What is our task to prepare, you could say, for when Uranus enters Gemini for good? So that's what I'll be thinking about as I'm reading this chart. Uranus just finished up in Taurus, and it will be going back into Taurus. Taurus is about our self-relationship, our values, our worth, including our self-relationship, also including our relationship with our gifts and talents. Taurus is when we start to make choices, when we start to say, oh, I like this. Oh, this is who I am. And in Aries, we're sort of searching for who we are. We're going out and getting experiences so that in Taurus we can then make choices about it. Technically, you think about Scorpio as being about choices. Taurus is opposite of Scorpio. So there is this idea of choice in Taurus, and it's really about defining ourselves more so that we can establish ourselves. When we're undefined, we can't establish ourselves. So that's the process in Taurus, and Uranus has just been finishing up there. It's currently in Gemini. It will return, and then it'll go back into Gemini. So it's about the Uranus process for the past 7 years has been about understanding who we are individually, what our individual gifts and talents are, what our self-relationship is. So it's different than our collective relationship. In other words, we can't really have a collective relationship if we don't know who we are individually. We can't have a collective relationship. We can't have a collective that is enlightened, that is sort of raising the boats of everybody, if we don't have a sense of who we are and what our individual gifts and talents are, what our individual genius is, what we have to contribute. Because what ends up happening is we're sort of, everyone's kind of diffuse and nobody really knows, and everything gets all tangled up and all that kind of stuff. And we leave ourselves ripe for various kinds of compensations, which we'll be talking about, which I think is kind of the soup that humanity has been in. So again, in Taurus, the roots are being put down and sunk down and established, like really established. They're growing in their girth, you could say. And then the trunk is also growing in its girth. And then in Gemini, we can think about that as the branches and the buds. And in terms of our development as human beings, the stage that I like to think about is the young child when they're just, going out into the world, like the 3-year-old or something like that, the 4-year-old, and they're just so in awe and wonder at the natural world around them, and they're splashing in puddles, and they just are wide-eyed and curious and just truly open and full of wonder. That's the state of Gemini that I like to think about when I think about this sign. So in this chart, we have this yod pattern that has Jupiter at the focal point, and we have the moon at the end of one leg and Pluto at the end of another leg. The yod pattern is about this idea of making adjustments because it's made up of 2 inconjuncts and then also a sextile. The sextile is about opportunity. The inconjunct is about making adjustments. It's about bringing ourselves back into alignment. And Pluto in evolutionary astrology has to do with the soul, and the moon in evolutionary astrology has to do with our egoic expression of the soul in this lifetime. Ego, they say in evolutionary astrology, is about we have to have ego so that we can be defined and have these individual experiences, and that's sort of how we help ourselves through these individual experiences. That's how we continue to evolve as souls. So it's about bringing ourselves, our soul selves, you could say. I have a question about that myself, which I'll talk about in a minute, but it's about bringing our soul selves back into alignment with truth, capital T, truth. This is Jupiter, capital T, truth. It's truth and lies. Small t, truth, would be about compensation, which is also what Jupiter is about. The question that I have about this is, are souls really out of alignment with truth? And I think the way they teach it in evolutionary astrology, I think they would say the answer to that is yes. That's challenging for me. I don't fully understand that. But there is this idea of bringing ourselves back into alignment with truth. And even if we just think in terms of our egoic soul expression in this lifetime, it's about bringing that back into alignment with capital T, truth. Pluto is in Aquarius, so it's this idea of humanity. So perhaps we could think of the soul of humanity has somehow gotten a little bit off track. And Jupiter suggests that how we've been out of alignment is a compensation of superiority that covers up for fundamental insecurity. So we think about Jupiter, we can think about caste systems and social hierarchies. And while there are natural hierarchies where, some people are further along in their understanding of things, or they have more of a gift for something, that sort of thing, it's not a worth hierarchy. That, to me, the worth hierarchy is where we get off track. Uranus in this chart is conjunct Venus. So Venus is at 2 degrees of Gemini. Uranus is at 0 degrees of Gemini. In between there is Sedna, which I don't think I'm going to talk about. But Uranus and Venus are conjunct, and that has to do with our worth and our values. And Venus naturally rules Taurus. It also naturally rules Libra. So Taurus, our relationship with ourselves; Libra, our relationship with others. If we haven't been able to establish our self-relationship, we're going to be shaky on our self-worth, and that's going to leave us vulnerable to compensations of that's going to leave us vulnerable to insecurity, which is going to lead to compensations of feeling one is superior to another as a way to compensate for that insecurity. So there's this sense of wanting to really look at this compensation and our sense of security and insecurity. Cancer can be this idea of security and insecurity. And really taking a look at that. Jupiter also has to do with this idea of growth. And to the extent that the collective, Uranus, the collective, prevents growth, keeps us, if we think about hierarchies and the idea of some groups thinking they're better than others, then what that leads to is an inability to individualize, because to individualize is to see things differently, is to take ownership of one's own way of seeing. And when one does that, it becomes a threat to the group that is based on this idea of hierarchy, of being better than, because of that underlying insecurity. So if we can, so that's that idea of Cancer and the shell. If the community doesn't make room for growth, then we can't grow more. We're confined by that shell, if that makes sense. So this idea of our sense of superiority, our belief in ourselves as superior, to the extent that we believe that, to the extent that we still have that residual in us, even if we've done a lot of work, then the opportunity during these next 4 months is to really see that more clearly. And we can tell from the times as we're seeing them right now that false idea of superiority will be being mirrored back to us in, writ large on the world stage. And we can perhaps understand that as the end point of this compensation of humanity and sort of the desperate attempt to maintain it because of the fear of that underlying insecurity. So I'm a big believer that what we see in the world is what's in us. So if we can understand what's in us, it may not be a one-to-one correspondence, but if we can understand what that shard is in us, that mirror is showing back to us, and work to heal that and work to resolve that, we can help to right humanity as a whole. So that's where I come. Is that the only way? No. Is that the right way for everybody? I can't say that for sure, but I do think I guess in my experience, greater security comes the more that I attend to what is in me that needs to be tended, as opposed to trying to change what's happening in the world. So I can say that about me personally in my personal journey. If we take a look at the some of the information here, so July 7th, Uranus entered Gemini, and this just says direct motion. When it enters the sign for the first time, the next sign in the zodiac, it'll always be direct. And then on November 7th, it'll go back into Taurus, and it'll be retrograde then, because it's going back into the sign before. And then on April 25th, not April 26th, I guess, it will be entering Gemini again, and it will stay there until 2032-2033. In August 3rd, 2032, it will enter Cancer for the first time, but then it will go back into Gemini, and then in 2033, it will enter Cancer for good. And Uranus takes about 7 years to go through each sign. The tarot card associated with the first decan of let's just look at this a little more. So the first decan, when Uranus enters Gemini, it's in the first decan, the first 10 degrees of Gemini. So the tarot card associated with those first 10 degrees is the Eight of Swords. Swords has to do with the mental sphere, the mind. And Jupiter has to do with this idea of expanding the mind. If we're insecure, we can't expand the mind. We can't expand our being. You could say it's expanding our being too. We can't expand if we're insecure. So the Eight of Swords, so I just want to show you, this is A.E. Waite's The Pictorial Key to the Tarot, 1910. It's in public domain. And so I just went on Internet Archive. There's a copy of it, and I downloaded it, and I entered everything into my database. And so this is a really convenient way to do this. So here is the Eight of Swords. We can think about this as the state of the human mind right now. This is how we're living right now, as a general rule. It explains why certain activities and actions are being taken in the world right now. We feel trapped. We feel, this is not a Gemini image, right? It's not the idea of a wonder and expansion. We're confined in our own minds, believing we're trapped. Belief, Jupiter, believing we're trapped. Believing we can't grow. And then the Sabian symbol has to do with this glass bottom boat, which says when you look down, you're looking at the wonders of the sea. And we can think of that perhaps as actual reality, as actually what is true. And the work, Jupiter, we could say the work is to adjust ourselves back into alignment to being able to expand, to being able to allow ourselves to see the wonders of the world like that young child, with full of curiosity and wonder. We can think, instead of curiosity, we can think in terms of wonder. And so that young child entering the world and relating to it with this incredible wonder, this natural curiosity born of wonder. And so that is the work, to bring ourselves back into alignment with that. That's how I would think about it. To the extent that our souls perhaps are weary and tired, or weary, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. We're weary and tired. We're both, actually. We're weary and weary. Sorry, I can't pronounce those words. And tired. To the extent that has been true, then perhaps it's about bringing back that sense of wonder in the world. And the way that we do that, in my experience, I guess I can't speak for everybody, in my experience, the way that's done is by entering into whatever wound is there, and allowing whatever the emotions are that are associated with that, allowing those to start moving again at the pace we're able, however slow, however little bit we have to start. We start there, and then gradually we grow our capacity, and we then start to be able to release. We shift from sort of perhaps being a stagnant swamp within ourselves to more of moving, living water within ourselves. I'm still not there myself. I'm still in the process of that, but that's the idea. Jupiter in Cancer, Jupiter is ruler of Pisces, has to do with the sea, and Cancer, of course, also has to do with water, is a water sign. So this idea of perhaps we can say that the truth is in the waters of our being. To restore ourselves to truth, we have to allow the waters to start moving again within us. And the compensation, again, the idea of superiority is the compensation that comes about when we close off to our emotional reality, close off to the pain of sometimes what that emotional reality is, and compensate for that by believing we're superior. That belief in our superiority allows us to not have to deal with the emotions that are up, and we can instead inflict harm or pain on somebody else. So that's the main thing. That's the main theme I'm seeing. Of course, we're going to start seeing technology and all that going through the just crazy. And us taking time to heal ourselves, to understand these dynamics at play within us, to bring ourselves back into alignment with capital T truth during these next 4 months is, I think, going to be really important, because how we use technology is not a problem. How we use technology is. And to the extent that we can kind of right ourselves and truly understand at a very deep level that we're all equal, that every human is worthy and has a right to a society that treats everybody with dignity, the more, I think, as we go through Gemini in the next 7 years, technology will be able to serve humanity and sort of raise everybody, all the boats, instead of just one or two. Right now we seem to be in a struggle of some people, because of trauma, because of wounding, really trying to assert that, trying to live out their idea of superiority, again, because of wound, because of trauma, as far as I can see. So if we can heal that within ourselves, I think that heart starts to help heal the collective and maybe start to shift this dynamic. Again, that's my personal way of seeing things. So I will leave it there. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for taking time to listen to this. For those of you who subscribe, thank you so much for that. It means a lot to me. For those of you who subscribe at a paid level, thank you so much for that. Thank you for believing in what I do and my perspective enough that you're willing to support it in that way. I deeply appreciate that. I just want to end, as I always end, by saying these are my perspectives. Take what works, leave the rest. Whatever is resonant for you, that is in the sense that it is helpful for you, that it gives you insight, that is healing and helpful, then that's what's meant for you, and anything else is not meant for you, not because of some sort of exclusive thing or anything like that, but it's just not what's going to be helpful for you. And that's what matters, what's helpful for us. So, having said that, take good care. I will leave it there. And yeah, that's all. All right, bye.